After keeping quiet for 50 years, famous director Francis Ford Coppola has finally told the truth about working with Gene Hackman. This truth changes how we think about one of the most powerful partnerships in movie history. Coppola didn't just tell another Hollywood story. She told a confession that shows who the real mind behind the conversation. A movie that changed American movies forever was. The story he hid for years shows why Hackman's work is still so powerful, and why his methods are more important than ever. After the huge success of The Godfather in 1972, Francis Ford Coppola was at a turning point in his career. Coppola didn't use his newfound fame to make another big epic. Instead, he directed The Conversation, a small, personal psychological film about a spying expert who is haunted by the things that might happen because of his job. At the time, Coppola asked Hackman to play the part of Harry Caul, the reclusive surveillance expert. Hackman was well known but not yet a popular name. Coppola just recently said that their first meeting was tense. Hackman had doubts about playing a character with so many layers and deep thoughts. Coppola said, Gene didn't say much when I first told him about the part. He just listened and nodded every once in a while. He just said, I understand this man, when I was done. I knew right then that no one else could play Harry Caul. Coppola has finally spoken out about how far Hackman went to play Harry Caul after decades of silence. Hackman didn't hang out with other players between takes like a lot of stars do. The actor cut himself off from the cast and crew. He would often sit alone with his saxophone, which he learned just for the part, and refused to talk to anyone. Coppola said she worried about Hackman's health while they were shooting, but she realized that his being alone wasn't because he was being tough. Hackman did this to really feel what the character felt. Incredibly alone. Coppola said, there was one day when I found Gene sitting in Harry's apartment set a long time after we were done shooting. The team had already left, but he stayed and just sat in the character's space, taking in the silence. He looked at me with Harry's eyes instead of Gene's and said, this is where he lives. I asked if everything was okay. That's when I understood he wasn't just pretending to be Harry Caul. He had become him. The effects of this method are clear all through the movie. In one of the most powerful scenes, Harry learns that his surveillance tape might have caught proof of a murder plot. Hackman shows how scary things are getting by trembling his hand and giving off a spooky look, not by using dramatic speech or showing strong emotions. Coppola now says that they didn't practice this scene. He just told Hackman what was going on and rolled the camera, catching a real moment of understanding that made it hard to tell who was acting and who was the character. Coppola said, what many people don't understand about Gene is that his greatest strength wasn't in what he did, but in what he let himself feel. Most artists show how they feel. Jen had it happen to him and let us see it. Coppola and Hackman had some problems when they worked together. Hackman had trouble with the weakness needed for Harry's confession scene, which was filmed in a church. After several tries that didn't work, Coppola tried something new. Coppola said, I told everyone to leave the set except Gene and the camera operator. Then I sat next to him in the confessional and told him about my own mistakes and guilt. I quietly left after about 20 minutes and gave the operator a nod. He then shot what would become the final version. You're not seeing acting. What you're seeing is a man facing his own soul. Other problems came up while making The Conversation that changed how it turned out in the end. Because Coppola had problems with his first director of photography, Haskell Wexler, Bill Butler, was hired to do the job. This change had an effect on the movie's style, giving it a distant, voyeuristic look that went well with Harry's character. The haunting piano score for the movie was written by David Shire before shooting started, which is not usually done. Shire would play the piano on set to help the players connect with the emotional tone of the scenes. Hackman found this especially helpful for staying in Harry's head. Coppola got a lot of ideas from Blow Up by Michelangelo Antonioni, especially the idea of using technology to find out who did something wrong. But Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf, which is also about a man who is cut off from society, had an equal effect on Harry Caul's character. Coppola said, I gave Gene both of these books before we started filming, not as research, but as emotional guides. He took them in completely. Even with these problems behind the scenes, or maybe even because of them, the conversation was a huge hit with critics. There were 3 Oscar bids for this movie, including one for Best Picture. It won the prestigious Palme d'Or at the 1974 Cannes Film Festival, but it didn't do well at the box office because The Godfather Part 2 came out the same year. In a strange way, the film's relative lack of popularity in the box office has helped it last so long, letting new generations keep discovering it. A lot of artists have been inspired by Gene Hackman's work in the conversation. Al Pacino has said that he has studied Hackman's work, especially how he can show strong feelings with little physical movement. One time, Pacino said, "Gene showed us all that power doesn't have to be loud. A show that is very quiet can sometimes break your heart." Steven Spielberg, who later cast Hackman in The French Connection 2, has said that Hackman's work with Coppola was a great example of how to build a character. The conversation has had a lasting effect on many people, not just those who saw it. Its themes of monitoring, privacy, and moral uncertainty may be even more important now than they were when it came out. Movies like Enemy of the State, which had Hackman play a part that reminded people of an older Harry Caul, give credit to Coppola and Hackman's work. When the movie was added to the National Film Registry in 1995, it made what movie fans had known for a long time official, that this group of people had made something important that would last. The new information that Coppola shared about working with Hackman sheds new light on their creative relationship. Coppola said, "Gene taught me something very important about directing. I learned from him that sometimes it wasn't my job to direct at all, but to make room for real things to happen. There were times when I felt less like a director and more like a witness on that set." Hackman quit acting in 2004 after giving powerful performances in movies like The French Connection, Unforgiven, and The Royal Tenenbaums. He stayed out of the public eye with the same quiet drive that he brought to many of his parts. His absence from screens has only made people appreciate the work he left behind more. The conversation is becoming more and more seen as one of his most complex performances. Hackman's dedication is shown in the movie's last scene, in which Harry, thinking that his own apartment is bugged, burns it piece by piece while looking for surveillance equipment. The scene was shot over 3 days, and Hackman did a lot of the damage himself. Coppola said that by the 3rd day, Joan was physically and emotionally exhausted. You're not just seeing an actor. You're seeing a man who has done everything he can for his art. There's a truth there when he finally sits in the ruins and plays his saxophone that no amount of direction could make him feel. The conversation's topics are more important now than they were back. Today, when privacy issues, data collection, and monitoring are commonplace, Harry Caul's moral crisis seems like a sign from heaven. People of all ages can relate to the movie's themes of duty, guilt, and the human cost of technology. Coppola and Hackman didn't just make a thriller. They also made a deep meditation on what it means to see without intervening, to know without acting. Coppola said in a recent interview, "What I want people to understand about Gene is that his approach wasn't about ego, method, or technique. It had to do with the truth. He was ready to make himself unhappy and live in the pain of who he was because he thought that was where honesty lived." Gene's dedication to emotional truth was a big deal in a field that was usually all about glitz and fakery. Francis Ford Coppola finally told the truth about John Hackman, and it's not just film history. It's a call to all of us who love movies. In a time of CGI spectacles and formula movies, their work together tells us that a real person's face is still the best special effect. Hackman's desire to become Harry Caul and live alone produced something that can't be copied by technology. It's a performance that stays with us because of how human it was, not because of it. When you watch the conversation again, keep in mind that what you're seeing is more than just acting. It's a man who is ready to show his soul for the sake of the truth. Courage may be Hackman's most lasting impact in a time when truth is filtered and personas are carefully put together. We have to lean in to hear the most powerful stories sometimes, just like Harry Caul did as he hunched over his headphones and looked for meaning in the places between the words.